Okay, welcome everyone to our Wednesday webinar. For those of you who don't know, my name is Daniel Medina, been with Investors Advantage since 2006. We're going to start off by going over our webpage. If you haven't been there, make sure you check it out. We post all of our past and upcoming webinars on our webinar page, and we post all of John's interviews on our interview section, some of which have 150,000 views. The latest was on TD Ameritrade. We are streaming live on Facebook, so make sure you tell your friends and family that we're doing it and share what we're doing, because we love doing it and we hope we're giving you guys something interesting. We are part of a larger group called Elite Financial Network and part of a group that manages $800 million. A couple things that's unique about us: we pay for independent research. We're one of only 2 advisors in the Conejo Valley that we know that does. And make sure you check out our website for our information and services and the videos that we post. And now here comes John.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm so glad you've been with us for, geez, it'll be 14 years just next month, as I recall. Time flies when you're having fun, right? So, you know, sometimes folks, we blow people's mind for a living. It's kind of what we like to do. And I don't know if you saw this, but this was just yesterday with the TSA announcement in the news that it wouldn't surprise you that 75% less travel this year compared to last year. But what blows my mind is the TSA report, they've confiscated 3 times the number of guns on airplanes, in the carry-on, not even in the luggage. Now let's see, what made you think, or I think, I can get on an airplane with a gun? And so there's a lot fewer of us flying, but more of us flying are carrying guns on airplanes. That's pretty scary. And, you know, it just makes me wonder, is that what we call American exceptionalism? You know, this really means we need to look at each other and see what's going on, because my mom worked for the FAA when nobody knew what the Federal Aviation Administration stood for back in the 60s. And God knows, I wish she were here now for me to go over with her what's going on. These are really crazy times. I wonder what she'd have to say about that. So that's the first one. And then the second one, we're going to talk about bubbles. Guess what? I don't know if you remember middle school, but you tell me, which class did you like the least? Was it history or was it math? I don't know about you, but for many of us, it might have been both. We liked those the least. And yet, I do recall a couple of times when I was in Audubon Junior High, I guess it's Audubon Middle School now, in LA on Crete, 4201 Crete, funny I remember that. In Los Angeles, and I was glad I was in the class. The first time I was glad I was really in the class, and I will always remember, was looking at World War II, where we were studying what took place in World War II. And my takeaway from that class was that the convoy, you know, going from this country to Japan or Germany, wherever it was going, could only travel at the speed of the slowest ship. So that blew my mind. And then I think it might have been Mrs. Minnick's English class the week before, where I learned a new word, metaphor, and I'm like, whoa, I wasn't able to use that word before, but that's quite a metaphor, isn't it? I mean, if the ships can't travel any faster than the slowest ship, does that have any parallels to us as people? I think it does, right? And so, you know, we're all on the same airplane. And in fact, you know, we breathe the same air, we drink the same water, we fly the same airplanes. And maybe we ought to figure out how to get along and how to help each other. Maybe that's been one of the benefits of COVID. But right now, the second thing that I remember in class, in history class, was a talk about tulips. And it blew my mind that from 1634 to 1637, there was a time in the Netherlands, we'll get into the details, but that where one tulip bulb or a case of bulbs was sufficient with which to buy an estate. And the reason we're talking about it, not because of history so much as one of those rhymes, you know, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. You're going to see some parallels here. And in fact, this was brought up, as I say, originally in my history class back in middle school, and then again with our research team with Harry Ditt. And then he and I were talking about it just last week. And I said, you know, this is something we should really talk about with folks, because it would appear to me that what has happened in the past could indeed happen again. But if we don't see history, if we don't do math, if we don't recognize some of these patterns, we wake up to shock and awe, assuming that we wake up. So we'll be talking about that, and then we'll get into some details as far as reverse mortgages. And we're glad Linda Fleischman could be with us to explain how they work. We're going to look at the pros and cons, not a recommendation at all. And in fact, please let me help you understand that all of the folks that we share our time with, because we think it's being beneficial to you, there is no remuneration of any kind. We don't share any kind of transaction costs. No cash is exchanging hands. So we do this work because we think it's important. And in fact, I have to say, in terms of importance, I just saw this today by the founder of Commonwealth, that 81% of Americans are experiencing financial insecurity pre-COVID-19. So that's 8 out of 10 people that are really worried about what's going on here. So let's get into some of the details, because we think if we can, as I say, learn from history, we might be able to duplicate the part we like, but we don't have to repeat it unless we want to. So here's the first piece that really kind of helps understand what happened. This is debt research that confirmed the market went up 60 times in 2.2 years. And at the top, as you can see, a single tulip bulb sold for over 10 times the annual wages of a skilled craftsman in the Netherlands. Now, in reality, this bubble had little consequence due to the limited size and scope, but it revealed the propensity for human delusion and greed in a short period of time, and took some famous people down with it, as you will see. So by 1636, the lowest quality of, or the most common tulip bulbs were worth a small fortune. The average price being roughly about 160 guilders, rising to 200 guilders at the peak of tulip menial. That's the exchange of their dollars at the time. And just to put it into perspective, a worker at that time was earning about 150 guilders a year. So that's quite a big difference. So the part that you can't miss is that a case of Semper Augustus bulbs, I guess those are the most desirable, being traded, that seller would have enough money to buy houses, land, or farms with one box of bulbs. So as all financial bubbles grow, so do they pop. And that's the parallel that I want you to kind of get a sense for. This was our first experience with watching bubbles burst. But as we will see, and as you already actually know, every 7-year-old in the world knows that bubbles burst 100% of the time, and there are no exceptions. We would submit to you that we're probably in a series of bubbles, and that they have a tendency to peak and then drop on average, according to debt research, about 80% on average. Who's prepared for that? No matter, fill in the blank with what the bubble might be. Can you imagine waking up to 20 cents on the dollar? In other words, it was worth $100, you lost 80 cents, now you got 20 cents left. 20 cents left. Who could imagine that reality? Probably none of us. So at one point, you could buy all of that with so very little. And then by the time we got to 1637, the price was 1% of what it was, according to the fact site. So maybe it was about the same price as a limit. So it also expanded. What happened was with the South Sea bubble at the time, which is a story that started around 1711, after a war with Spain, in the next chart, left Britain 10 million pounds in debt. That's one of those parallels that we're concerned about, because we see a lot of debt today, whether it's the consumer, whether it's companies, or whether it's governments. And let's just spend a minute here on companies. What we're very concerned about is not just the second wave of the coronavirus, but we see unprecedented numbers of businesses filing bankruptcy. In fact, one source, I believe is the Washington Post, suggested that there were 100,000 businesses that filed bankruptcy in the last 3 months. And they submit that that number is higher than it ever got to during the Great Depression, and certainly far faster. It took about 3 years for the US economy to experience Great Depression 1. We've surpassed those bankruptcy levels in 3 months. So when people look at, well, it's going to be a V-shaped recovery, I hope they're right, but I'm afraid they're not going to be correct. And I don't want to give people false promise. If it is a V-shape, it turns right around and bounces back. God bless us all. Happy days are here again. But suppose it doesn't. That's what we're trying to say. When people get so confident, and we get cocky and arrogant. And we're just saying, well, you know, I can be 100% complacent. I can be Rip Van Winkle and everything's just going to turn out fine. Just put my money on X and before I die, it grows 1,000% and I retire rich and famous. Well, sometimes things go awry. And what we thought was going to happen did not happen at all. So back with the South Sea Company, that was something that Britain came up with, where they wanted to offer exclusive trading rights with Spain's colonies in the South Seas, which we now know as South America. And they thought that Britain thought that would sweeten the deal. The company also planned to establish a monopoly in the slave trade, which was burgeoning at that time. So it was thought that the company, South Seas, could never fail. Sound familiar? South Seas management team created rumors that the company had been granted full use of Latin America ports by Spain. But if you didn't check the details, you didn't recognize that Spain only allowed 3 ships per year in Latin America, only 3. So, you know, we could promote anything, but let's look at the reality in terms of, is it true? So what we can see is that there were some tremendous unrealistic expectations. They were the norm at that time for South Seas investors and speculators, to include Sir Isaac Newton. I love this one. I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. Sound like anybody we know? I'm going to get on an airplane with a loaded gun with my carry-on. Have a nice flight. So that way, when I get angry at you, I can just whip out my gun and shoot you, you know, right? I mean, what else would I do with the gun on an airplane? I don't know. So what we see here is not much different than Enron. And by the way, a good friend of mine is an advisor in Houston. He went to speak with Enron employees. You remember that company where everybody just knew everything was just fine, particularly the people who worked at Enron, because they saw all the orders, that they knew all the people. So it wasn't uncommon for him to find many of the people, I think he spoke to about 100 Enron employees at the time, where there was $1 million or more in their 401k. And guess how the money was invested? In Enron stock, of course. He suggested that these folks diversify. They told him to go, you know where. And about a year later, they ended up with about 10 cents on the dollar in the Enron bankruptcy. So that's what happens when we get real full of ourselves. So we see that Sir Isaac Newton sold his shares of the South Sea Company, bought some back after he realized a gain of a 7,000-pound profit due to his worries about the coming stock market crash. But the South Sea bubble continued to inflate, so he changed his mind and bought more shares, according to Jesse Colombo in June of 2012. So Dent Research, Harry Dent put it this way just this month, August 2020. This bubble impacted the English, French, and other European economies substantially, as there was much more public speculation and loss. Sound familiar? It actually marked a long-term peak in joint stock prices, which was a 67-year bear market that turned into 1787 before broader stock exchanges emerged, and a roaring, quote, quote, where we are right now, 233-year bull market since, which Harry believes is about to crash more than ever by my forecast, per Harry Dent. Dent went on to say, and we wonder why we are witnessing the greatest single bubble in modern history, 2009 to 2020, with central banks directly goosing stock and financial assets with direct quantitative easing purchases, right? We call it stimulus. Some people call it we can't live without it, and artificial profits for massive stock buybacks. Yes, history does often repeat itself, and the worst bubbles are the ones supported by governments. So we will close, or in this part, with this, I think it's a great picture of a massive bubble. There are some who suggest that there are bubbles all over the place, bubbles in the stock market, bubbles in the bond market, and bubbles in the real estate market all over the world. And as I say, I think it's safe to agree that eventually bubbles burst. The real question becomes, how do you, in advance, keep your assets from being handed to you? How do you move those assets that have been highly inflated for whatever reason? But to make it simple, we understand buy low, sell high, right? So whatever has increased in value, it makes sense to take the money off the table periodically. You can always put it back if you like, although Sir Isaac Newton, I imagine, wishes he had not done that. But maybe it also makes sense to diversify in other areas where the prices are lower, as opposed to just piling money or leaving money in positions where the prices are quite high, hoping that they go higher. That often is called the greater fool's theory. And if you sell on top, then of course you're fine. But if it moves against you and now your, whatever it might be, is off 40, 50, 60, 70, 80%, I mean, it's just hard to imagine. But these things do happen. And there are those that we follow that suggest we could see 40 to 80% declines on equities, whether they happen to be stocks or they happen to be real estate. And as I say, you know, when it's stocks, we can immediately sell. We understand how to do that. Sometimes when we get really immersed with other positions that we're very fond of, we get emotionally attached, we never sell them. We just expect the price to keep going up. And of course it does, until it doesn't. And then it's not fun at all in looking at that situation. So that's the work that we like to do, is to help people see how can we prepare for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and particularly the unforeseen. All right, so in the meantime, oh, and by the way, thank you for your referrals. I believe we received 3 today, particularly for those who are frontline workers. Daniel and I will sit down on Zoom for up to 90 minutes at no cost to prepare a financial plan, to look at if you win, how much money you're going to need behind door number 1 to make work optional on your time frame. How much loss can you accept so that maybe you don't have to go through a 40 or an 80% decline if you want to limit your loss to something less than that? Is it possible that your portfolio or your holdings can be set up so that the loss is limited, so that you don't need a Hail Mary pass to get back to even? And then what happens to either breadwinner financially? In other words, if there's a survivor, regardless of whether or not you're married, you're accustomed to someone else's income in your household. If that person doesn't come home financially, what needs to be in your bag of tricks so that you might miss them, but you don't miss their money, right? And it's a simple mathematical equation, but most people don't do the math, and so they're completely guessing, and then they wake up and find out, wow, that's not exactly what I intended to have happen. And then finally, we'll do, again, in 90 minutes for frontline workers at no cost, and typically the cost of doing a financial plan across the country appears to be about $2,000 for each plan. We'll look at the, what are your education goals for the children or the grandchildren? And the way we help people craft that conversation is, what do you want to be prepared for financially? Is it 4 years at Harvard? Is it 1 year at Cal State Northridge? Are they going to live at home? Is it 15 years from now? But let's see what you're trying to do and put the equation in place so that you can see, if I do this and we get this kind of return, by that time, they will graduate. And guess what? We'll all be crying. And as the parent, I'll be crying the most because nobody has any debt. That would be just fine with everybody. Okay, on that note, let's look at mortgages. And we have Linda Fleischman on hand, who is in Santa Clarita, but she works doing all kinds of mortgages all over, primarily the state of California, where she is licensed. And she was in the banking industry for 13 years, and she's been in the mortgage business for another 13 years, more recently. And as I say, she does, whether it's regular refis or purchases, but also looking at reverse mortgages. Again, this is not a recommendation, but it is not uncommon for us to get to a place with our clients or with those you refer our way, where the question becomes, look, I'm pretty much tapped out. I really need more money. What am I going to do? Well, there are several options, whether it's refi, if you can, or looking at a reverse mortgage, but it's something we want folks to know about, not necessarily say, do this. We're not saying that at all. We are saying, let's learn about it because it may be something that is worth evaluating. So Linda Fleischman, if you would so, please take it from here, bring us up to date, and then we'll be open for a Q&A. And in fact, I think there's a little way to send your message to Daniel, and he'll make sure that we get your questions answered. And by the way, we really appreciate the questions you guys pose on our calls, because I think it might have something to do with the anonymity, but you raise really good questions. So we'll make sure we give you the best answers we possibly can. Linda, tell us about the pros and cons of reverse mortgages, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. That was fabulous listening to you and your information. So thank you for that. Yeah, I've been doing mortgages for about 21 years now. And part of what I do besides regular refinances and purchases is I also do reverse mortgages. It's a great way, whether you own your house, depending on what you owe in your home, or if you're looking to purchase a new home. A lot of people don't realize that they can purchase a home with a reverse mortgage as well. So I wanted to kind of go through some different things. You can turn the page, Daniel. So we're going to go into both home buying and also refinances and just kind of explain it. A lot of times what I find with reverses is that people have a preconceived notion from things that they've heard out on the internet or from a friend or from somebody else who may have had a bad experience about what a reverse mortgage is. And my goal is always to eliminate the errors in that and to give people the real information, and just so they can make a qualified decision on whether this is right for them. It is not always right for everybody. Okay, go ahead, Daniel. So I'm kind of going to go through a few things. I'm going to explain how it works. I'm going to explain some of the costs and some of the benefits, and just kind of go through a bunch of different things to make it real easy for you. So, okay, next slide. So what a reverse mortgage is, I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit, but what a reverse mortgage, if you look at a traditional mortgage, you have a loan amount, you pay a payment every month. Some of that payment goes to principal, some of it goes to interest. It's amortized over 30 years, you have your payment. On a reverse mortgage, it's the opposite. You still have a loan amount, you still are paying interest, however, you're not required to pay any principal. So the principal is going to be added onto your mortgage. So for example, if you started off with a mortgage that was $100,000 on a typical normal mortgage that we think of, you would be paying, let's just say you were at a 3.5% interest rate. I just kind of picked an example. Out of that payment, you'd be paying $449 a month for your payment. Out of that, $157 goes to principal and $291 goes to interest. So on a reverse mortgage, you wouldn't be responsible for that $157. Although, as we know, most of us don't have a $100,000 mortgage, so those numbers are bigger. But what it does is that you don't have to make any payment at all, so that $449 a month that you're paying goes away. You are responsible to still pay the property taxes and the insurance on the home, so that still continues. Some of the advantage of a reverse mortgage, when I look at clients, I'm usually looking at people who have been working and are now retired, and maybe their retirement is only Social Security. That seems to come up a lot, where that's your only income coming in. So if you're getting $2,000, $2,300 a month in Social Security and your mortgage payment is $1,000, that's a big chunk of what you're paying every month towards a mortgage. So whether you have the equity, if you currently own the home, or whether you're going to go ahead and purchase a new home and not have a payment, that's what makes sense for reverse mortgage. A lot of times you're going to be moving, possibly selling a property, and if you're selling and you're getting, you know, some of the equity out of that home, then you would look to put it into this home, and then you're not making a payment. So you can't actually keep the other home. You are allowed to own two. However, the home that has the reverse mortgage does have to be your primary residence. You also need to be 62. So anybody, you know, younger than that, you can, if you're married to somebody younger than that, you can still get a reverse as long as the one person is at least 62. Okay, so go ahead and let's flip to the next. Let's go one more. Okay. So here's a couple differences, which I kind of went over some of them, but you can, with a traditional mortgage, you can either purchase or refi. You can do the same thing with a reverse mortgage. You can purchase or refinance. There's still a loan on the property, fixed rate or an adjustable rate. Those are the same. Typically on that though, if you're purchasing with a reverse mortgage, most of the time you're going to be in a fixed rate. Just seems to work out better. Those rates they're not going to be exactly the same rates as a conventional mortgage, but they're going to be in that arena. So if a conventional mortgage is at 3%, you might be at 3.5 or 3.75 on a reverse. So it's not going to be hugely higher, but it's typically a little bit higher. If you're doing a refinance, most of the time we're going to recommend that you do a line of credit. And there's some reasons for that. One of them on the refinance is that the way that it works is that the equity that you're allowed to get for the entire mortgage, it's split up between 2 years. So it's split up, you get a certain lump sum the first year, and then you get the rest of the line of credit the second year. So you can't access it all at once. If you do a fixed mortgage, then you only get that first year and you don't get the additional. So sometimes people use the reverse mortgage on a refinance as a line of credit. Again, you can have that line of credit. You're only going to accrue interest on what you use and not what is just in the line of credit. So if you have a $200,000 line and you're using $100,000, you're only going to accrue interest on that $100,000. Another misconception that a lot of times comes up is that people think that they don't own the home on a reverse, and that's absolutely not true. You own the home. The title is in your name. You can have it in a trust if you own a trust. If you're married and you're both on title, then you would have both of your names on there, but it is your house, your ownership. You do not have any monthly payments. I do have some clients who really just want to make the payment, and they have. It's optional. If you really want to keep down that interest from growing, which it does, then you can make a payment. But again, the whole point of it is to utilize your equity in order to live your life. People live, month to month with what their income is. So this allows you to have more liquidity during that month. Still required to pay the taxes and insurance, take care of the property. The difference again is that on a traditional mortgage, you're making a payment and you're paying some principal, although it's small, you're still paying principal, so you're paying down that mortgage, it's reducing. On a reverse mortgage, so if you start out with a $100,000 mortgage and the interest is $200, then the next month you're going to owe $100,200. That's going to keep accumulating and growing. So that mortgage will continue to grow. It's based on your equity. It's also based on your age, on how much they allow you to have. What happens though on a reverse is that by the time it gets to, let's just say you live for 15 years in that house, and by the time you pass, the mortgage has now surpassed what your equity is. So now you owe more than the property is worth, and you pass away, then your heirs do not have to take care of that upside down mortgage. They basically just let them know that you've passed, and then the house goes back to the bank. So you're not required to go ahead and pay anything back on that. Now, opposite is that, let's just say whenever you pass, then the equity that's in the property, that goes, your heirs come in, they sell the house, whatever's there is theirs. So it doesn't go to the bank. So you get both sides of that, which is really the best part of that. My goal is always to tell my clients to outlive the equity, so you can, live for free over there. There's no prepayment penalties. So if for some reason also let's just say you did a reverse mortgage and in a couple of years you decided, you know what, I have enough income now, something else happened and I'm fine to pay the mortgage, you can also refinance out of a reverse mortgage. So that's an option as well. Okay, go ahead and we can move that slide. You do again have to be 62. And you can use it again, as I said, for a purchase or a refinance, and you can also refinance out of it if you're not happy with it for some reason. If you actually I went through that, so let's keep going. One of the things that you do on the reverse is you do have to do a counseling, so that is required to make sure that you're aware of how a reverse mortgage works. And that's very quick. It's like an hour. So that's not a real big deal. Okay, next slide. And the benefits really, when I talk to clients, it's always about what's your current income. If somebody tells me that they have, really good income coming in, they have pension, they have Social Security, they're still working in a lot of cases, then sometimes I wouldn't, if they can afford a regular mortgage, I probably would not tell them to get a reverse. But typically, if you're looking at your income being reduced to where you're on Social Security or your income's low enough or you want more spendable income, a reverse is a great way to go ahead and facilitate staying in your home. And that way you can use your cash in other places. You can also put a line of credit on there again so that you can use it if something comes up. So we all know things always come up when you own a house, you know, when you're living life. So if you need to access some of those funds, you can do that as well. And again, if you do have to live in the house as your primary residence, if you move out, if you have to go into assisted living, go into a nursing home, as long as one of the two people are still living in the property, then they can stay there and continue with the reverse. But if neither person is living in the property, then you do have to either refinance or sell the property. So you can't move out and still keep the reverse. It does have to be owner occupied. Okay, and one more. The costs on the reverse, there is mortgage insurance that's associated with a reverse. That's why you can stay in, you know, when you're upside down, there's insurance that gets paid. So you do pay a percentage up front, which is 2%, which is again financed in. And then they also charge about 0.5% annually for the monthly. So you'll see that also. So the interest in the mortgage insurance is also added and accumulating on your loan, okay, while that grows. You also will have, if it's a purchase or a refinance, you'll have the typical fees for that, which would be escrow, title, appraisal, notary fees, things like that. Those are all going to be there. Again, they're all up front, nothing's hidden. Sometimes you will see origination fees, and those are also capped. So there's you can't charge too much. You can't get charged more than $6,000 is the max on an origination fee. Most of the time when I do loans, typically I don't charge an origination fee. Every once in a while it comes up depending on, you know, what your loan situation is, but most of the time, at least for me, most people do charge it is what I find. But again, everybody's a little bit different that way. So all those fees can be financed into the loan and not paid up front. So you're good on that side. Okay, next slide. I went through most of this. If for some reason there's no, when you don't qualify per se for a reverse mortgage, it's not like a typical loan where we look at your income and your debts. They look at what they call the residual. So they're looking to see what is your income, including your assets. They use a calculation for that. And they want to make sure you have enough to live on after that amount. The credit score is also not an important factor. However, you can't have had a foreclosure or bankruptcy within a certain period of time. If there is a lot of credit issues, then sometimes they will look at that and ask you to do what they call a set aside. So they will ask you to put money aside for taxes and insurance. I haven't had to do too much of that. Most of my clients, I pretty much pre-qualify up front to make sure that they know. So everything is disclosed up front, so you know exactly what you're getting into. There should be no surprises when you do a reverse mortgage. Okay. Next slide. The cons are pretty much, when I talk to clients, one of the things that we talk about is, you know, do you have an heir that you really want to leave funds to? If you do, and that's important to you, you know, this is my house, I want my kids to get all of the equity that's in this house, and you're able to live, then the reverse may not be for you. If your kids are more interested in your being able to live in your home, you know, without worrying about, you know, making payments, then a lot of times a reverse can make sense for you. So the fees are a little bit higher because you're getting that mortgage insurance premium. Again, it depends if you have an origination fee or not. But I have a lot of clients who have purchased. I've done more purchases, I think, than refinances for the reverse mortgage. And I've spoken to them years later, and they're all very happy. So as long as it's the right product for you, I think that it's a really good thing to look into and just discuss and see if it makes sense. It does not make sense for everybody, but I'm one of those who likes to look at everybody's situation differently. Nobody goes into the same box in a sense. Okay, I'm kind of, the rest of the examples are just some examples, which I don't think we really need to go into. They typically lend, it's hard, there's not a set percentage that you can get on a reverse. It's typically, it's a calculation that they do based on life expectancy, based on if it's a refi or a purchase. We usually see that it's about a 60%, basically a 60% down payment. Pretty much 50 to 60% is what you're looking at putting down. So if you only have saved 20% for the purchase you're looking at, that's probably not going to fit either in terms of that. Okay, so I think I've wrapped all that up. If anybody, I don't know if there's any questions, anybody that want, if there's any preset questions. Daniel?
Sorry, I had to turn my mic back
That's
on.
okay.
Okay, we're gonna open up for questions. For anybody you have questions on your Zoom menu bar, there's a question and answer box. You can also send it to me via the chat. And we do have some questions that have come in. First question for you, Linda. I think you actually went over this, but are interest rates typically higher or lower than traditional mortgages?
They are typically a little bit higher. If you're doing the fixed rate, it's usually about 1/4 to 1/2% higher than an average mortgage typically. The lines of credit, however, those ones they're actually pretty good. They're probably in the 2%, 3% range. They're going to be a little bit lower, but they're a variable rate, so they are going to change with interest rate changes. So they're not locked in. So those ones will change. Those are the equity lines. They're basically like equity lines.
What has given reverse mortgages such a bad rap?
You know, I think years ago, before I actually got into the business, I believe there were some times where people did not own the title to the home. And I think like any other industry, I think there's unscrupulous people out there that were taking advantage. But there's a lot of legality in play. There's a lot of compliance in play. So I think misinformation spreads faster than real information, unfortunately, is what I see out there. Even on regular mortgages, I see that all the time. So I think that's the biggest issue, that somebody told somebody and they told their friend and they went, oh my God, a reverse mortgage is terrible. But you don't always know the background of what happened, or if that's actually what it really was. So I think that's a lot of the reasons that it gets a bad rep. I think it's just misinformation that's out there. That's why I try to at least provide the information. It's up to everybody else to decide if that's right for them, as long as you have the right information. Again, it's not for everybody. And I'm certainly not one who's going to sell anything or talk to somebody who, if they can't sleep at night, that's always been my thing. If you can't sleep at night, I don't care if it's the best thing for you, it's not the right thing for you. And that's a big thing too.
We would agree. We're big on education. So
Yep.
more than anything, explore what you're going into and then
Absolutely.
make your own decision.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the mortgage insurance, specifically reverse mortgages?
Yeah, mortgage insurance in terms of a reverse is, again, this is a HUD product. So it's kind of like, if people are familiar with FHA loans, it's the same type of thing. FHA also charges an upfront mortgage insurance premium, and then they also charge monthly. This is very similar. You have an upfront mortgage insurance premium, and then you have a monthly mortgage insurance premium. And that helps to fund it so that, again, if you're upside down, if you owe $300,000 and now your house is worth $200,000 and you leave the house and you walk away, then they have to come in with that $100,000 difference. So the insurance helps to pay for that. I actually had a good friend of mine, her father and mother I had done a reverse for. They lived out in Vegas. No, they moved to Vegas. They were out in Palm Springs. And she passed away, and he wanted to move closer to the family, and he was upside down at the time. That's when the market had come down. And he literally just handed back the keys and said, here you go. And he left and came back to live near his family. So that's what that mortgage insurance premium is paying for. It's for that peace of mind to know that you can stay in your house, even if the equity is no longer there, and you're still not going to ever make a payment.
And Linda, the impact on his credit, was there? How did that work?
No,
Okay.
no, that doesn't get reported to credit because you're not making a payment. So there is no credit reporting. You get a monthly statement. It'll show you what your balance is and what it's growing to. So you can clearly see what that is. And when we give out quotes, it'll give you a chart. I can show you in 10 years the estimate of how much you're going to owe. Pretty, unless it's a line of credit, because we don't know what you're going to draw. But on a fixed rate, for sure, we can say, okay, if you draw this whole thing out, here's what, you know, in 10 years, 5 years, 4 years, whatever amount, here's what you're going to owe. So you can kind of see that as well and say, okay, that makes sense.
Linda, is there a max you can do on a reverse mortgage?
The reverse mortgage is based on, they will use an appraised value on the conforming limit. So for example, right now the max conforming limit in like LA County is 765, 600. If your house is worth 900,000, they're still going to use an appraised value of 765, 600. They won't go over that and base the numbers on that. There are what we call like jumbo reverses. They are not through the same, it's not through HUD. It's a separate type. So let's say your house is worth $2 million and you want to get a reverse mortgage. You can do those. They are similar in that you're not making a payment. It's a reverse mortgage. However, that one has definitely different interest rates, much higher, and that does have more fees because it's not through HUD. So it is different.
Got it. Here's a random question for you, Linda. Are you related to the Fleischmann margarine and yeast?
I wish. We are spelled the same though. You spelled my name wrong, but it's okay. But yeah, I have actually 2 N's at the end of my name. And so no, I am not related to them.
I apologize.
Wish I was.
John, here's a question for you. Does the stock market do better under Democratic or Republicans?
Ah, yes, that comes about every election cycle. And of course, the conventional wisdom is that it has to do better under the Republicans, right? Although we actually went back to look at the data, and it's exactly the opposite. The market tends to do better under a Democratic administration. Now, the Republicans say, you know, the reason we do worse is because we had to fix your mistakes from the last 4 or 8 years. So I love that conversation, but the data shows it's not much different, but there does seem to be better returns during a Democratic administration.
I believe it's only slightly, isn't it?
Yeah, very slightly. I think my recollection, Daniel, is that that's a 0.5%. So again, it's one of those talking points that people get all worked up about it, but of course, most of us don't do our homework. We just go by our gut feeling, and the Republicans are about business. That's how we do it. So the market has to really respond to that. Not so much.
John, is there a way to forecast who's going to win the election based on the market?
Well, there seems to be. This goes back to '84, and then this appears to be like 9 out of 10 times. If you look at the 3 months prior to the election, if the market's up, that's better for the incumbent, and if the market's down, that's better for the contender. So we're in that window right now. So the timing for this question is really quite well timed, and we'll see who's winning this war. Is it the bull or the bear? It's really hard to tell at this point. And the way we look at it is, you know, everybody enjoys a melt up. It's that meltdown that just really destroys things, right? Your little apple cart. So stay tuned to watch this. A better answer might be look at the betting in Vegas. That might be a better and easier way to see how the prognosticators there are looking at who's going to win, and using that as a guide in terms of who might be the winner.
Excellent. One more question for you, Linda, and then we'll wrap it up in the interest of time. Is it better to take out a 15-year or a 30-year mortgage?
You know, that all depends on cash flow. Because the good thing about a 30-year mortgage is that your payment's always going to be lower. You can pay it as a 15-year and pay it off. The interest rate won't be the same, but at least you have the flexibility of the payment. When you have a 15-year, the payment is a lot higher, and then you're done. So if something comes up like, oh, I don't know, COVID, where all of a sudden maybe your income is not the same and it was unexpected, you still have to make that 15-year payment. Whereas on the 30, you can always fall back to the 30, but you can always pay more. I do have people that have been in 15 that I've refinanced, and honestly, a year or two later, they come back and they refi back to a 30.
Wow.
So I think it depends. I think if your income is strong enough and you're feeling good about it, I'm doing a lot of both now. I'm doing a lot of 15s and I'm doing a lot of 30s. I mean, because the rates are just ridiculously low. But for anybody looking to refi that's thinking about it and looking at ads, make sure you're really trusting the people you do business with, and that you're also checking to make sure if there's any points. Because what they do is sometimes they offer you really low rates, and sometimes there's costs that you're not realizing that you shouldn't be paying. And it doesn't always make sense to pay a lot of cost in order to get a lower rate. You have to look at the numbers. It's all about the numbers.
Well, and let me chime in, Daniel, Linda, it is all about the numbers and all about your preference, but sometimes people have a hard and fast decision and they don't really look at anything else. And I just like to call to our attention, the banks have been magnificent at getting us to loan every dollar we possibly can so they can put it back out there on a MasterCard at 18 or 21%, right? And yet telling us that we should pay off our loans faster. I mean, if I were a bank, I'm sure I would be an advocate of both sides of that equation. But let's just recognize that, you know, at the same time, putting more money in a house where it ends up in a position where you never use it, I don't know, is that a blessing? Or, you know, or the other side of it is always having a payment. Is that a curse or a blessing? I mean, if you were renting, you'd always have a payment. Is there much difference? But all I'm trying to say is sometimes we want our clients in a position where you have options. And when you lock yourself in terms of this is the way we're going to do it, and then we see people where they have no real money anymore outside of the house, it's all inside the house. That to me seems kind of cuckoo, to be perfectly honest. Use the money while you can use it, because once you're gone, you can't put your hands on it, right?
From a planning perspective, it's absolutely crazy to have all your money in the house and nothing outside, which is what we see a lot of people do. It just creates some really tough decisions later in life when you need that cash flow and it's all your money is always gone into the house.
Right.
What value is having it paid off?
Well, and we've only seen houses and rents go up, right? Actually, we should do our homework on that too, because there are other occasions where that has stopped and reversed, both rents and home prices. But most of us don't do our homework, and we talk to people who only talk about how great real estate is, or we look at people, particularly from other countries, where they're not invested, maybe not at all, or very little in equities or even in the bank. It's all in the houses, but they have not recognized history. Again, we can see more than at least two occasions where home prices have dropped and took 4 decades in the case of the US after the Great Depression, 4 decades, that's 40 years to come back after you were long dead, by the way. And rents fell too and did not come back for the same time period. So since then, we've only seen prices go up, which makes it look very easy. All we have to do is buy all the houses we can possibly accumulate, and we've got the road to riches going on. But as I say, it's always good when it's on the up. It's not so much fun when it's on the way down, and particularly if and when it doesn't come back during the time that we need that money to do something else with it. And that's part of what drives us, certainly me, learning about the Depression, where folks saw real estate prices and stock prices, New York in particular, come back long after, on average, we were well dead. That does not sound like fun to me. So that's part of the reason we do this right here, right now, to broaden the scope and help people see this is what's really happened. Now, you decide how you want to play the game, but we don't want you to wake up in shock and awe like you didn't see this one coming. We want to tell you this could have been on the horizon. How do you want to play the game to be better prepared for the good, the bad, and the unforeseen?
Absolutely.
You know, I lied. We're going to have one more question because this is a good one. Linda, with the way the market's going right now, is it a good time to seek a reverse mortgage?
I think that the reverse mortgage, I think it doesn't matter on the market necessarily. You're looking at your equity. If your equity is good right now, if you're looking to refinance and do a reverse, then the market is up. So your value is going to be higher, which means that you can access more. So yeah, I think that's a really good time to do that. And again, people are purchasing. So if you're able to come in with that down payment and really, and it helps you to not make a payment, absolutely. I'm a big believer. People always say, what's going to happen if, rates go up? People are going to buy. And my whole thing is, people are going to live their lives. So people are going to get married. People are going to move. People are going to go other places. So you have to also look at not just the market and where it's at. You also have to look at what your life is about and what makes sense. If you're buying a property to, invest, that might be a different conversation. If you're looking for a place to purchase and live in, and that's your home, you're going to be there for a while. So yeah, I think it is. I think, again, it depends on your situation. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. But yeah, I think it is a good time.
Excellent. Great answer. Okay, John, what do we have going on next week?
Next week, okay, so remember, we look at it, Daniel and I look at it this way, our team looks at it this way. What amount of money do you need to make work optional when you want to on your terms? And if that's 60, 65, 70, whatever that might be, now we have to get another 20, 30 years so that you can see that you can afford to keep making work optional at whatever your current income might be, say $100,000 a year in $20. That's step number one. But then we need to look at what happens in the event of premature death. Death is always premature, right? And it has nothing to do with whether or not you're married. It has everything to do with, are you dependent upon, or is someone other than you, who's dependent on whose income? And if one of you died financially, would that upset your apple cart? Again, it's a mathematical equation, but let me say it to you this way. If you're accustomed to someone, or if you have alimony, which is one of those issues that people spend so much time and money arguing about, $80,000, he's going to pay me, she's going to pay me for the rest of my life. Okay, let's suppose it's $80,000, and let's suppose 60 days from now, he or she goes to heaven. Now what you got? Nothing. So what we want you to know is, let's put a $2 million life insurance policy on that person. A 4% withdrawal of $2 million is $80,000. Let them go to heaven. You win with the death certificate. Try to get 6-7% return on $2 million. Take a withdrawal of 4%. Now you know I may or may not miss you, but I will not miss a dime. I'm okay financially. That's how we want to play the game. So we'll be talking about how we do this. We'll have an example for you so that you can wrap your minds around it, as opposed to say, well, I'm worth more dead than alive. That's crazy, and often it's wrong. But what do each survivor need to keep things going if the other breadwinner were to just do an exit stage left? And then we'll talk about style. Is it term? Is it whole life? Is it some combination? All right. We talked about long-term care. And by the way, one of the questions we got after that Wednesday webinar was, what about life insurance? So we'll be addressing what about life insurance, and when do you need it, when do you not, and dispelling some some misperceptions or misconceptions there in terms of, well, I'm too young or I'm too old. No, it's about looking at whether or not you need it, and we can help you do that. And then we're going to get into so many situations. You need an attorney on your Rolodex or on your phone in the event, the grandson gets a DUI, or whoever gets a DUI, or there's an issue with the house, or there's a COVID issue that you didn't expect and now you have to deal with. It would be good to have a relationship with an attorney. You already know who can go to bat for you. So we've lined up an attorney who does exactly that, and we'll be able to explain to you why we think it's important for you to keep an attorney on file and available who you already know, and maybe have some degree of a relationship, so it's easier not to have to search and peck and hope to find someone you feel comfortable with. We don't think hope is a strategy, so we like to put as much certainty into the equation as we possibly can. All right, so these last 4-6 months, this year has been unprecedented in so many ways. And for many of us, we have not at all been prepared. And by the way, as far as the market is concerned, my personal opinion is that we will test the lows of March 23rd. Now, as long as we're hitting new highs, you don't have to worry about that. But these things can turn around very viciously. And let's keep in mind, the peak for the year was reached February 19th. And by March 23rd, we saw the low for the year so far. That's just a little over 30 days. So it just gives you a sense of how fast things can turn upside down. And I must say to you, in fact, I was having a conversation with two of the neighbors I saw on March 24th. These gentlemen are well into their 70s. They've been retired for some time. And I have to tell you, when I saw them on that weekend after March 23rd, I thought they were going to cry. They didn't give me any details. I've talked to them a number of times. I never saw them really upset about anything. As I say, I didn't get any details, but I could sense that they were very, very worried about their account. So I'm saying to you, we don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen, and we do not need to try and have a prediction, but we can do a better job of greater preparation for, as I say, the good, the bad, and the unforeseen. So if you weren't prepared for what's been going on, you're probably not prepared for the next 20 years. And if we can help you be better prepared, that's what we like to do. So feel free to call on us. And as again, for those who are not frontline workers, the average cost of doing a financial plan is $2,000. That's something that we can discuss. There's some negotiation that can go on there in terms of how that might be accomplished. And for those who are frontline workers, we're willing to spend, wherever they might be, a Zoom call for 90 minutes to see what has to happen for you to make work optional. We want to be supportive of the people who support us, because they put their lives on the line every single day. And I'm so honored and, so thankful that they're willing to do that, because I'm not doing it. But some people are willing to do this, and I want to say, let me be part of your cheering team. Let me see if we can't help you see the other side, see the bridge to getting to the other side, where you too can feel like you're doing the work, and you too are going to be prepared to weather the storm, but get to the other side where you can see, hey, financially, it's going to be okay. We might even be better off than we are today, but we see what we're doing as opposed to throwing darts and hoping for things not to turn upside down, which I think they often do before they turn right side up. Okay, so with that, let me suggest, folks, that, look, mask up, keep your distances. We want you here. We've got a lot of work to do. I think we've got a lot of fun that we can have. Imagine that as we get through this COVID thing, get to the other side of whatever is coming. We can keep our sense of humor, but we've got to support each other. So please mask up, please keep your distances so that we can see you next week. And we'll be here next week and the week behind that one. And we'll see how far this goes, but we are enjoying doing these Wednesday webinars. And as Daniel said, please feel free to share the information with those who know. We don't know of another organization that's in the same business as we are that's doing this work. So we appreciate your support. We'll see you next week.